You know, there's something about family dinners that can either lift you up or absolutely crush your soul. I'm talking about those moments when everyone's gathered around the table and suddenly you become the center of attention for all the wrong reasons. That's exactly what happened to me 3 years ago, and I'm still processing how dramatically everything changed after that one devastating evening. My name is Sarah, and I need to tell you this story because it's been eating at me ever since. Not in a bad way, but in that way where you know something significant happened, something that changed the entire trajectory of your life, and you can't quite believe it actually occurred. It was Thanksgiving 2021, and I was dreading going home to Connecticut. I'd been working on this little app for about 8 months, barely making ends meet, living in a studio apartment in Austin that was honestly too small for one person, let alone the dreams I was harboring. My family had always been successful. My dad's a corporate lawyer, my mom's a real estate agent who sells million-dollar homes like they're candy bars, and my older brother Jake had just made partner at his consulting firm. Then there was me, 28 years old, with a computer science degree I'd barely used, trying to build something from nothing. The app was called Connect Local, and the idea was simple: helping small businesses in rural and suburban areas connect with their communities in ways that the big social media platforms just couldn't facilitate. I knew it sounded boring when I explained it to people. I knew it didn't have the sexy appeal of the next Instagram or TikTok. But I'd grown up in a small town, and I'd seen how hard it was for local businesses to really reach their customers, to build those genuine relationships that keep communities thriving. I'd been bootstrapping everything. My savings account was basically empty. I was living off ramen and whatever free food I could find at tech meetups, and I hadn't taken a real vacation in over a year. But I believed in what I was building. I had about 300 businesses using the platform, mostly in Texas and Oklahoma. And while the numbers weren't huge, the feedback was incredible. These business owners were telling me how Connect Local was helping them increase foot traffic, build customer loyalty, connect with neighboring businesses for cross-promotion, real, tangible impacts. But try explaining that to your family when they're expecting you to announce a 6-figure job offer, or at least a steady paycheck. The drive from Austin to Connecticut took me 2 days because I couldn't afford to fly, and honestly, I needed that time to mentally prepare myself. I knew what was coming. I knew there would be questions about my little project, as my mom liked to call it. I knew my dad would make some comment about when I was going to get a real job. I knew Jake would probably share some story about his latest client or his recent promotion, and I'd have to sit there smiling and nodding while feeling like a complete failure. What I didn't expect was how brutal it would actually be. We were about halfway through dinner when the interrogation began. My mom had made this elaborate spread: turkey, stuffing, cranberry sauce, 3 different kinds of potatoes, green bean casserole, the works. Everyone was in a good mood, wine was flowing, and I was actually starting to relax when my dad cleared his throat in that way that meant he was about to make an announcement or ask a serious question. "So Sarah," he said, cutting into his turkey with surgical precision, "your mother tells me you're still working on that app thing. How's that going?" The table went quiet. Not completely quiet. There was still the sound of forks against plates, the background hum of the football game playing in the living room, but quiet enough that I knew everyone was listening. My Aunt Linda, my Uncle Robert, my cousins, even my grandmother, who usually just smiled and nodded through family conversations. "It's going really well, actually," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "We've got almost 300 businesses using the platform now, and the engagement rates are incredible. I'm actually in talks with a few potential investors about—" "300?" Jake interrupted, and I could hear the skepticism in his voice. "That's it? After 8 months?" I felt my face getting hot. "It's not about the numbers right now, Jake. It's about proving the concept, showing that there's real value in what we're building." "We?" my dad asked. "I thought you were working alone." "I am, mostly. But I've got a few contractors helping with development, and I'm building a community of users who are really invested in the platform." My Uncle Robert, who'd been quiet up until this point, decided to join the conversation. "You know, Sarah, when I was your age, I was already making good money in sales, not trying to chase some pipe dream about apps and startups." "It's not a pipe dream," I said, and I could hear the defensive edge creeping into my voice. "Small businesses are underserved by existing platforms. There's a real need for what I'm building." "But how are you paying rent?" my mom asked, and there was genuine concern in her voice, but also something else. Embarrassment, maybe? Like she was worried about what the rest of the family was thinking about her daughter's life choices. "I'm managing," I said. "I've got some savings, and I'm doing some freelance work on the side." "Freelance work," my dad repeated. "So you're not even focused full-time on this app?" "I am focused full-time on it. The freelance work is just to cover expenses while I'm building the business." My cousin Mark, who's about my age and works in marketing for a big pharmaceutical company, leaned forward. "Have you thought about just getting a regular job? I mean, apps are risky, right? Most of them fail." "Most businesses fail," I shot back. "That doesn't mean people should stop trying to build things. But at least with a regular job, you'd have benefits, security, a 401k, my Aunt Linda chimed in. You could work on your app as a hobby on the weekends." A hobby. She called 8 months of 18-hour days, of learning to code features I'd never built before, of cold calling businesses and explaining my vision over and over again, of scraping together enough money to keep the servers running. She called all of that a hobby. "It's not a hobby," I said, and I could feel my voice getting shaky. "This is my career. This is what I'm building my life around." "But sweetheart," my grandmother said in that gentle voice that somehow made everything worse, "don't you want to have a family someday? How can you support a family with a little app?" A little app. There it was again. Everyone at this table was determined to diminish what I was doing, to make it sound like I was playing games on my phone instead of building something real. "I'm not worried about supporting a family right now," I said. "I'm worried about building something that matters." "But what if it doesn't work out?" my mom asked. "What if you spend all this time and money and energy and it goes nowhere? Then what?" "Then I'll have learned something," I said. "Then I'll have tried." Jake laughed, actually laughed. "Sarah, you can't pay rent with life lessons." "You know what?" I said, standing up from the table. "I think I need some air." I walked out onto the back porch, leaving behind the warmth of the house and the sound of my family's voices. It was cold. Connecticut in November is no joke, but I needed to get away from that table, from those looks of pity and condescension, from the way they were all so certain that I was making a mistake. I stood there for maybe 10 minutes, just breathing in the cold air and trying not to cry. I could hear them through the window, their voices lower now but still audible. "She's always been stubborn," my mom was saying. "Someone needs to talk sense into her," my dad replied. "It's just a phase," my Aunt Linda added. "She'll figure it out eventually." A phase. 8 months of my life, my entire future as I saw it, and they thought it was just a phase. I went back inside, finished dinner without saying much, and spent the rest of the weekend being polite but distant. Every conversation felt like a minefield. Every question about my work felt like an attack. By the time I got back to Austin, I was emotionally exhausted and questioning everything I'd been working toward. But here's the thing about hitting rock bottom. Sometimes it's exactly what you need to push yourself harder than you ever have before. I threw myself into Connect Local with the intensity that bordered on obsession. I started waking up at 5 in the morning to code before I had to start my freelance work. I spent every evening reaching out to new businesses, refining the user experience, building new features. I stopped going out with friends. I stopped dating. I stopped doing anything that wasn't directly related to growing my business. The breakthrough came about 3 months later, in February 2022. I'd been working on a feature that would allow businesses to create virtual events, think online workshops, webinars, community gatherings, that would then be promoted to their local customer base. It seemed like a natural extension of what we were already doing, but I had no idea how much it would change everything. The first business to really embrace the virtual events feature was a bookstore in Oklahoma called Page Turners. The owner, a woman named Margaret, had been struggling to compete with online retailers, but she had this amazing knowledge of literature and this passion for connecting readers with books they'd love. She started hosting virtual book clubs, author interviews, writing workshops, all through Connect Local. Within a month, her events were drawing people not just from her town, but from all over Oklahoma and even neighboring states. She was selling more books than she had in years, but more importantly, she was building this incredible community of book lovers who were genuinely excited about what she was offering. Margaret's success caught the attention of other businesses on the platform. Soon, I had restaurants hosting virtual cooking classes, fitness studios offering online workouts, art galleries providing virtual tours, music venues streaming live performances, all of this happening through Connect Local, all of it driving real revenue for these small businesses. The numbers started growing rapidly. By the end of March, I had over 800 businesses using the platform. By May, it was 1,500. The user engagement was through the roof. People were spending an average of 45 minutes per session on the platform, which was incredible for a business-focused app. But what really got people's attention was the impact we were having on small business revenue. I started collecting data from users about how Connect Local was affecting their bottom line, and the results were staggering. On average, businesses using our virtual events feature were seeing a 30% increase in revenue within their first 3 months on the platform. That's when the investors started calling. It started with a couple of local angel investors in Austin who'd heard about what I was doing through the startup community. Then it was a small venture capital firm in Dallas, then a bigger firm in Silicon Valley. By July, I was fielding calls from investors almost every day. The first real offer came from a mid-sized VC firm called Meridian Capital. They wanted to invest $2 million for a 20% stake in the company. $2 million. I remember sitting in my tiny studio apartment, staring at the term sheet, trying to process what was happening. A year earlier, I'd been borrowing money from my parents to cover rent. Now investors were offering me $2 million for a piece of my little app. But I didn't take that first offer. Not because it wasn't good. It was incredibly generous. But because I was starting to realize just how big Connect Local could become. The data was showing that we weren't just helping small businesses. We were fundamentally changing how local communities interacted with commerce and culture. I spent the next few months continuing to grow the platform while negotiating with different investors. By October, I had over 3,000 businesses using Connect Local, and we were processing over $1 million in transactions per month. The virtual events feature had evolved into a full-fledged digital marketplace where businesses could sell products, services, and experiences directly to their local communities. That's when Forbes reached out. I still remember the email. It was from a journalist named Rebecca Chen, who covered emerging technology and startup culture. She'd been tracking Connect Local's growth and wanted to do a feature story about small-town entrepreneurship and the power of local business networks. The interview process was intense. Rebecca spent 3 days with me, shadowing me as I worked, talking to businesses that used the platform, diving deep into the data and the vision behind what I was building. She interviewed Margaret from Page Turners, talked to restaurant owners in Texas who were using Connect Local to offer meal delivery services, spoke with fitness instructors who were building entire online communities around their local studios. What she found was a story about more than just a successful app. She found a story about how technology could strengthen local communities rather than replace them, about how small businesses could compete with big corporations by leveraging their most valuable asset, their connection to their customers. The article was scheduled to run in the December issue of Forbes, with a smaller feature online. But something happened that changed everything. About a week before the print deadline, Rebecca called me with news that made my head spin. Forbes wanted to make Connect Local their cover story, not just a feature inside the magazine, but the actual cover story for their December issue about innovation in small business. "Sarah," she said, "I've been covering startups for 8 years, and I've never seen anything quite like what you've built. This isn't just a business story. It's a story about the future of local commerce." The cover story was titled, "The Small Town Revolutionary: How One Woman's App is Transforming Local Business." There was going to be a photo shoot, a comprehensive feature about my journey from unemployed computer science graduate to successful entrepreneur, and detailed analysis of how Connect Local was disrupting traditional business models. I couldn't believe it. Less than a year after my family had mocked my little startup at Thanksgiving dinner, I was going to be on the cover of Forbes. But the real validation came from the numbers. The day the Forbes article went live online, Connect Local saw a massive spike in signups. We gained over 500 new business users in a single day. The servers couldn't handle the traffic. I had to emergency scale our infrastructure just to keep the platform running. More importantly, the article caught the attention of some major investors. Within a week of the Forbes piece going live, I had 3 different venture capital firms offering me funding rounds that would value Connect Local at over $50 million. $50 million for my little app. I ended up taking an offer from Redwood Ventures, a San Francisco-based firm that specialized in businesses focused on community impact. They invested $15 million for a 25% stake, which gave me the resources to hire a full team, expand to new markets, and build out features I'd only dreamed about. But you know what the best part was? The best part was calling my family to tell them the news. I waited until the magazine hit newsstands. I waited until I could hold the actual physical copy in my hands, with my face on the cover and the headline about my revolutionary app. Then I drove to Connecticut for an impromptu visit. I walked into my parents' house on a Saturday afternoon, didn't say a word about why I was there, just sat down at the kitchen table and placed the magazine in front of them. My mom picked it up first. I watched her face as she read the cover, as she realized what she was looking at. Her eyes got wide, her mouth opened slightly, and she just stared at the magazine for what felt like forever. "Sarah," she whispered, "is this real?" "It's real," I said. My dad came over, looked at the magazine, looked at me, looked back at the magazine. "You're on the cover of Forbes." "I'm on the cover of Forbes." "Your little app," my mom said. And then she caught herself. "I mean, your business, your company." "Connect Local," I said. "It's called Connect Local." We called Jake, called my aunt and uncle, called my grandmother. Within an hour, the whole family was gathered in my parents' living room, passing around the magazine, reading the article out loud, asking me questions about the business, about the funding, about what this all meant. And you know what? They were proud, genuinely, authentically proud. My dad kept shaking his head and saying, "I can't believe it. I just can't believe it." My mom was crying, actually crying, and telling me how sorry she was for not believing in me, for not understanding what I was building. But here's the thing that really got to me. My grandmother, who'd asked me about supporting a family with my little app, pulled me aside later that evening. "Sarah," she said, "I want you to know something. I've been thinking about what you said at Thanksgiving, about building something that matters. I didn't understand it then, but I do now. You weren't just building a business, you were building a bridge between people and their communities. That's not a little anything. That's something beautiful." "I'm not going to lie," I cried. I cried because it felt so good to finally be understood, to finally have my family see what I'd been working toward all along. But the real validation didn't come from the magazine cover, or the investment, or even my family's newfound respect. It came from the businesses that were using Connect Local, from the communities that were being strengthened by what I'd built. Margaret from Page Turner sent me a handwritten letter after the Forbes article came out. She told me that her virtual book clubs had grown into a network of over 2,000 readers across 4 states, that she'd published a collection of essays written by participants in her writing workshops, that she was planning to open a second location because business was so good. "You didn't just build an app," she wrote. "You gave small businesses like mine a way to dream bigger while staying true to what we love about serving our communities." That's when I knew I'd succeeded. Not when I got on the cover of Forbes, not when investors were throwing money at me, but when I realized that Connect Local was doing exactly what I'd envisioned from the beginning, helping small businesses thrive by strengthening their connections to their communities. Today, Connect Local has over 10,000 businesses using the platform. We've processed over $100 million in transactions. We've facilitated thousands of virtual events, helped businesses weather the challenges of the pandemic, and created economic opportunities in communities that big tech companies often overlook. We're expanding internationally, partnering with economic development organizations, and building new features that will help small businesses compete in an increasingly digital marketplace. The team has grown to over 40 people. We've opened offices in Austin, Denver, and Atlanta, and we're working on technologies that I couldn't have imagined when I was coding alone in my studio apartment. But I still think about that Thanksgiving dinner. I think about how easy it would have been to give up, to accept that maybe everyone was right, that maybe I should just get a regular job and work on my app as a hobby on the weekends. I think about all the dreams that get crushed around family dinner tables, all the entrepreneurs who never get the chance to prove that their little startup could change the world. I think about how many innovations never happen because someone's family convinces them to be realistic, to be practical, to stop chasing pipe dreams. And I think about what I would tell my younger self, sitting at that table, feeling small and dismissed and alone. I would tell her to keep going. I would tell her that the people who love you don't always understand your vision, and that's okay. I would tell her that success isn't just about proving other people wrong. It's about proving yourself right. It's about building something that matters, regardless of whether anyone else can see its value in the beginning. I would tell her that being mocked for your dreams is sometimes the price you pay for having dreams worth pursuing. Most importantly, I would tell her that the size of your startup isn't measured by how much money you have, or how many employees you've hired, or whether your family understands what you're doing. It's measured by the impact you're having on the world, by the problems you're solving, by the communities you're serving. My little startup might have started small, but it was never little. It was always exactly as big as it needed to be. And if you're out there right now, working on something that other people don't understand, something that feels too small or too risky or too different, I want you to know that you're not alone. I want you to know that the best businesses often start with someone who sees a problem that everyone else is ignoring, who believes in a solution that everyone else thinks is impossible. Keep building, keep believing, keep going, even when the people around that dinner table can't see what you're seeing. Because someday, you might just end up on the cover of Forbes, holding a magazine that proves your little startup was never little at all. And when that day comes, I hope you'll remember that the real victory isn't in proving other people wrong. It's in staying true to your vision, in building something that matters, in changing the world one small business, one community, one connection at a time. That's what Connect Local taught me. That's what my journey from that devastating Thanksgiving dinner to the Forbes cover story really means. It's not about revenge or vindication. It's about the power of believing in something bigger than yourself, even when you're the only one who can see it. Especially when you're the only one who can see it.